What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of Best Bets and Props, where I go over all of my betting action for this weekend's UFC card, which is UFC 293, a pay-per-view down under Sydney, Australia. We've got Israel Adesanya defending his championship at middleweight against the new challenger Sean Strickland. Co-main event, hometown favorite, heavyweight banger. We've got Tuivasa versus the Russian striker in Alexander Volkov. So 12 fights make up this card. Should be a pretty fun pay-per-view. You know, at first glance, not the most high-level pay-per-view, not the most star-studded card. There's been some fights that have fallen off and things like that. But overall, you look at these matchups, I think they make a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of really fun matchups that could go one of two ways. And overall, I've got 4 money lines and I've got 3 props that make up my betting action on this card. I'm not going the heaviest on this card. I've got 3 underdogs out of those 4 money lines. And honestly, this might be the most unpopular best bets and props I've done in quite some time, because I'm going against all of the hometown talent in Australia, and I'm going against a lot of popular favorites on this card. So there's a lot of big favorites on this card. I know there's a lot of easy looking parlay pieces at first glance, but when I look at the fight card from a betting perspective, I look at it from a value perspective, I'm finding myself on the opposite side of some of the favorites here. Not my intention to play contrarian. That's not what I typically do. I look at these fights. I try to avoid looking at the odds before I tape a fight and analyze it. I don't try to look at anybody else's breakdowns or Twitter's opinions. I try to hide away from all of that and make my read based on the tape and based on the stats I see. So I happen to find myself on these sides. If it's against something that you've bet, don't worry about sounding off in the comments. Let me know why you think I might be wrong. I would love to hear it. I'm not the type to get offended. So let's start with the first money line of the night. So the first one of the night on the card is an underdog shot on Chepe Mariscal against Jack Jenkins at featherweight. So I think Chepe Mariscal is being overlooked as an underdog, and I think Jack Jenkins is a little bit overrated as a favorite in this spot. So best case scenario for Jack Jenkins, he keeps this fight at striking range, uses those devastating leg kicks and his technical and really defensively sound striking style to win the majority of this fight. Jack Jenkins is not a power threat, in my opinion, aside from the leg kicks, and I think it would go to a decision victory for Jack Jenkins if he gets the fight that he wants. But against Jose Chepe Mariscal, this guy's got a lot more UFC caliber experience even before his time in the UFC. He's fought and lost against guys that have been very successful in the UFC. He got knocked out a couple of times against Steve Garcia and Joanderson Brito pretty badly. But the guy's defense is looking more improved these days. You saw his fight over the summer against Trevor Peek, who's not a technical fighter by any means, but he threw a lot of output. Chepe defended well, even showed that he's got that good judo base, was able to take the fight to the mat against Trevor Peek, and just pretty much put on a full array of MMA skills to win that fight up at 155. So now he's back down to his natural weight class at 145. The cardio and toughness and resolve I saw in that fight from Chepe Mariscal, that meant a lot. Now, the opponent in Trevor Peek didn't mean all that much, but I think if Chepe Mariscal can take this fight to the mat and take Jack Jenkins off of his feet, I think he can win this fight, most likely by decision. Now, Jack Jenkins is a guy who, his wrestling could use some work. We saw in his first fight against Don Shainis earlier this year at UFC 284, really poor performance against a guy who I think in Don Shainis is not UFC caliber or anything even close. And, Jack Jenkins spent a lot of time on his back, got reversed in some spots there, and it was overall a competitive fight against the guy in Don Shainis. I think Jack Jenkins should have finished in that fight. Jack Jenkins goes on to then win a greasy split decision at UFC Jacksonville this summer over Jamal Emmers. Now, no shame there. Jamal Emmers a very high-level guy, athletic guy, but again, Jamal Emmers taking down Jack Jenkins, controlling him on the mat, and I thought he won that fight. So I'm taking the stab on Chepe Mariscal. I think the value falls on him at plus 170. I put just 0.75 units on Chepe Mariscal. I think he wins by decision. Moving on to the next fight on the card, still on the prelims and at light heavyweight, I've got a 0.75 unit bet on another underdog here. Plus 225 ticket on Jung to defeat Carlos Ulberg. Now, this is probably the most highly debatable one on the card. I know Ulberg is a very popular and very confident pick this week from what I've seen, but from what I saw and what I'm reading into this fight, I'm still very skeptical on Carlos Ulberg's potential at this price tag. I'm looking through the lens of a guy who's about minus 270, minus 280, minus 300 on some sports books in Carlos Ulberg. When I look at it through that lens, I just think that there's a lot of value on Jung, who I picked up at plus 225. Again, 0.75 units on him, so not even a full unit, but a guy who matches Carlos Ulberg's size in Jung. Both guys around 6'4" with a long reach. A guy in Jung who has a lot more MMA experience against Carlos Ulberg, who is a professional former kickboxer. Now, he's adapted well to MMA. He's done well in the UFC outside of his debut loss by knockout against Kennedy and Zetriku. You know, he's knocked out a lot of very low-level guys, right? He's knocked out Nikolai Negumereanu. He's knocked out Ihor Potieria recently, and he did knock out Tafon Nchukwi. None of these wins are really aging all that well, in my opinion, and it still doesn't answer the question, can he go past one round and be successful and dominant? As a kickboxer, his defensive wrestling has not been tested in any of those fights. They ended too quickly. Now, he did have one performance that went 3 rounds in the UFC, and that was his second fight against Fabio Cherant, but kind of a gun-shy performance against Fabio Cherant, who is a physically imposing 205er, but not a very good UFC talent and a guy who's no longer with the promotion. So, didn't really answer much. It wasn't a very high-paced fight. I'm still wondering what happens if he gets in a firefight with Jung, and Jung doesn't get knocked out. You know, what happens if he's forced to go to round 2? What if Jung can wear on him and be the more physical man in the clinch? What if Jung starts wrestling and taking him down when he's tired in rounds 2 and rounds 3? I just think there's a lot of ways to win. Carlos Ulberg is the more one-dimensional fighter here. And, in most worlds, I think he wins this fight, but that's not what we're getting. We're getting a massive favorite in Carlos Ulberg here. So I think he should be the favorite, but not by this much. So it's more of a mathematical play. I think that there's a good chance Jung gets knocked out in round 1. So for all you guys that are out there with a heavy investment on Carlos Ulberg, I think in most worlds your bet cashes, but I'm playing this from a mathematical perspective, taking the underdog shot here where I think there's value. So again, 0.75 units at plus 225 on Jung. The next bet I have is yet another underdog, and this is the very next fight, but now heading off the main card at light heavyweight between Tyson Pedro and Anton Turkalj. And I took Turkalj over the weekend at plus 115 for 1 unit of investment on the underdog. And this is a newcomer, still looking for his first fight in the UFC. He takes on the local guy from Sydney, Tyson Pedro, who's an explosive striker early, but more of a grappler on the mat. But one thing is for certain, out of all of the UFC fights that Pedro has had and his entire MMA career as a whole, I mean, this guy is proven to only win in round 1. If it goes past 5 minutes, Pedro goes on to lose the fight, whether inside the distance, by stoppage, or by a decision loss. So ever since his 3-year hiatus due to his knee surgery and repair, he's taken on Harry Hunsucker, Ike Villanueva, and also Modestas Bukauskas this year, who he lost to, even though Pedro was a decently sized favorite. So I cashed on Modestas, and I think Modestas is a much better distance striker than Anton Turkalj. But Turkalj is a very explosive guy in round 1, super durable athlete as well, as we saw in his last fight, and a good grappler that we've seen on the regional scene, Dana White Contender Series, and even in his last fight against Vitor Petrino, we saw him take massive punishment, keep going forward, show a lot of good heart, and able to work through fatigue. So Anton is looking for his first UFC win. He dropped the ball against Gelton Almeida. No shame there on short notice in the debut. And also, like I said, against Vitor Petrino, who seems pretty monstrous at the weight class right now. Tyson Pedro, as long as Anton can survive that early onslaught in round 1, mathematically, statistically, and based in the record of Pedro, Turkalj should be able to take over this fight in rounds 2 and rounds 3. So at plus 115 is where I got him at for 1 unit. I'm still seeing him as a slight underdog, minus 105 on some books. I still like that price all the way up to minus 120. So give me the pleasure man here to survive round 1 and go into this fight in round 2 and round 3 and take over. And for my final moneyline bet in the co-main event of the evening at heavyweight, I am taking the favorite this time. But again, it's going against the local guy. I'm taking Alexander Volkov at heavyweight to defeat Tai Tuivasa. Now this is a minus 220 price tag I got on Volkov. I put just 2 units on him to win, slightly under 1 unit in return. And I think Alexander Volkov will be winning this fight up until he loses the fight, right? Tai Tuivasa has 14 wins, 13 by knockout. All 13 of those knockouts coming under 1.5 rounds. And just like I tore apart the record lately of Tyson Pedro's wins, I think Tai Tuivasa, you can kind of do something similar, right? You know, in his, he's coming off of back-to-back knockout losses to Cyril Gane by round 3 knockout and Pavlovich round 1. I can forgive that. That's high-level guys, both of which will probably have fought for a title in their time in the UFC. But before that, Tai Tuivasa on a great 5-fight winning streak, all by round 1 or round 2 knockout. Now, it was over Stefan Struve, tall, physical guy, but at the end of his career, was against Harry Hunsucker, who's a bum, Greg Hardy, bum, Augusto Sakai, not very good at this point, and Derek Lewis, that was the most impressive one. He got close range in round 2 against Lewis and was able to elbow him against the temple, knock him out. But Derek Lewis, again, older guy towards the end of his reign. So I can tear apart those wins, and I know that mathematically, like I said, all of his knockouts come under 1.5. As this fight goes into round 2 and later into round 3, potentially, it's getting better and better for Volkov, who's 6'7", super long reach, technical kickboxer, and a guy who's only been knocked out by Hail Mary knockout in round 3 against Derek Lewis back in 2018, and, 10 years ago against Vitaly Minikov, who's a very, that guy's a beast, and that was a decade ago. So I think it's going to be the body kicks, the long strikes, keep it technical, maintain distance, against a guy in Tai Tuivasa who has to get in close early, back Volkov against the cage, probably hit him in the body, lower his head, and go for some big overhand knockout. Definitely possible for Tai Tuivasa. I could see him getting it done, and it would be fun. I'm a big Tai Tuivasa fan. I love that, but I got to go with the guy who's going to be winning this fight for the majority of the time, and that is Volkov, minus 220, 2 units to win, less than 1 in return. Moving on to the 3 props I have on this card, I'll go back to the Tyson Pedro Anton Turkalj for this one. This is a very small 0.15 unit sprinkle at plus 850 for Tyson Pedro to win via submission in round 1. Now, Anton Turkalj, a guy who will be in danger in this fight in Tyson Pedro's best round. I think Pedro's super athletic. Anton Turkalj, not the best striking defense. But he does have a granite chin, so if Pedro can knock him over the head, kick his legs out from underneath him, jump on him on the ground, Pedro's a very high-level BJJ black belt. He could lock up a submission, but his winning potential is all in round 1. So that's why I'm playing that round 1 sub. It was plus 850 on BetOnline. I think that price is still out there. I just put 0.15 units on that prop, almost as a hedge in case he does get the job done in his best round. So moving on to a fight further earlier up on the prelims, Blood Diamond versus Charlie Radke. I've got the under 2.5 rounds there at minus 185. A 1-unit bet on that one. Mike Mathitha, former professional kickboxer, friend of Israel Adesanya. The only reason this guy's in the UFC is because of Izzy's alliance with him, his ties to City Kickboxing. But he's still a specialist in the UFC octagon fighting in MMA. He's a good kickboxer, but looks a little bit awkward. If I'm being honest, in the UFC cage, he's 0-2 in the league right now. We know what his weakness is going to be: getting taken off of his feet, grounded out, and submitted, which happened against Jeremiah Wells in his very first fight. The wrestle boxer in the Koski, was it Ryan Koski last time? He could not finish the job with Mike Mathitha. But I think Charlie Radke can. Charlie Radke is making his debut. He's a BJJ black belt, a grappler by trade, but also a very powerful striker with fast hands. So even making his debut here, I know Radke's like a minus 300 favorite. Don't see a lot of value on him, but I do think he wins. I think even the fear of the takedown for Mike Mathitha could leave his chin exposed here. He could be expecting a shot from Charlie Radke, and Charlie Radke could come over the top with that vicious lead left hook that I've seen him throw in the regional scene and flatline people. Or Radke could take him down to the mat. He's got a very slick back take and a quick choke, which he finished his last fight on the regional scene to capture the CFFC 170-pound belt. He got a round 1 submission there via rear naked choke. So round 1 submission is how I see this for Charlie Radke, but he could also get his head kicked off from Mike Mathitha, who's a very powerful kickboxer. So the under 2.5 here I think is a good bet. Minus 185, 1-unit play on that. And then we move into the very last fight of the card, the pay-per-view title fight between Israel Adesanya and Sean Strickland. Both of these guys are coming off of round 2 TKO stoppages, but the majority of their fights do go all 5 rounds and do get won by decision. So I think it is going to be Israel Adesanya that wins, dances around Sean Strickland, skirts around the perimeter of the cage, leg kicks, jabs from each stance, body kicks, body punches. Keeps the fight at kickboxing range as Sean Strickland, with his flat-footed style, plods forward and tries to box. So I think Izzy wins. I think he looks like a massive favorite. But I do think this goes over 3.5 rounds. And at minus 115 on Bovada, I took this for 1.5 units. Now, I got burned the last time I played the overs in Izzy's fight against Alex Pereira. I could get burned here, but the pattern is cemented for both of these guys. Most of the time, they do see the later parts of a fight. Sean Strickland has only been knocked out by Alex Pereira, that vicious signature left hook, and by a spinning heel kick from Elizao Zaleski dos Santos a while back. So, I think Israel will play a safe fight here. He doesn't want to get trapped against the cage and get his head boxed off by Sean Strickland. That would be pretty embarrassing. But I'm not sure if he finishes this fight until the later parts of the fight. I actually think Adesanya wins by decision. So I'm going to play just 1.5 units on that over 3.5 round prop, minus 115. So there you have it, you guys. That is all the betting action I have. The 4 money lines, 3 underdogs, 1 favorite, 3 props. Not the most popular picks this week, I'm sure, because I'm going against a lot of big favorites, but that's the way I see this. Not the most heavily invested betting-wise compared to usual, but it's kind of low investment with high payout plus money tags. So if I'm going to be wrong, I'll be wrong on some plus money numbers. As far as other confident picks in this card, Manel Cape, I think, should really go in there and prove that he's levels and levels above the debuting Felipe dos Santos. I think Cape has a good chance of winning this fight using his wrestling. The Manel Cape sub I like. I think that's a good look. I do like Justin Tafa to win the fight against Austin Lane in that quote-unquote rematch, but I think Tafa does win within 1 round if he gets it done. So round 1 knockout for Tafa, whatever that prop might be. I do like that one against Austin Lane. But going on to other fights, Jamie Mullarkey's a big favorite. I could see John McDessie actually making this one close. I could see this fight going to the scorecards. The split decision prop I could see live for Jamie Mullarkey and John McDessie. You got one guy in Jamie Mullarkey moving forward, stalking, putting on the pressure, and probably holding John McDessie in the clinch. You got John McDessie, the guy who's got all the veteran experience and probably the better, cleaner technical counter striker off of his back foot. So he might land on Jamie Mullarkey, who's hittable, but moving backwards might not be the best visual for the judges. So I could see them split. I like that split decision play for the Mullarkey-McDessie fight. So that's a look there. The Hackparast Quinones overs. I like the overs in that fight. I don't think Quinones is all that bad, and I think Hackparast is a guy, 10 UFC appearances, 8 of those going to the scorecards. He's a massive favorite, but I could see this fight going over 1.5 rounds. I could see it going all the way to the scorecards there. So those are the extra props I like if I had to put some more extra cash on this card. But sticking with what I have so far, let me know in the comments what you guys like on this card, the ways that you plan on making money. Let me know how stupid I am for playing Da-Un Jung at underdog odds. I don't mind hearing it. Again, I don't get offended if you guys disagree. I just love conversation. I love mixed martial arts. And I hope you guys have a very profitable time this weekend at this Sydney card for UFC 293. So hit the like, hit the subscribe on the way out. For all details on this card from my analysis, check out the full card breakdown or the live stream I did with Bleed MMA last night. So hope you guys enjoy. Hope you guys cash out. I'll talk to you guys next time. Cheers.